And then the next third complication or variation you can say that the examiner will try to create is that sometimes instead of just requiring you to explain the change in equilibrium price and quantity due to changes in demand and supply, the examiner will ask you to explain the whole process or explain why the market moves from one equilibrium to another after, let's say, the demand has increased. So increase in demand, so far we have learned a quick and dirty way that we can just sketch out a demand and supply graph. If demand is increasing, then as compared to initial price and quantity, to see what will happen to price and quantity, we'll shift the demand curve to the right and read off from this new graph that the price will increase and similarly the quantity will increase. When I'm saying the examiner will ask you to explain the whole process of why the market or how the market adjusts from this equilibrium A to equilibrium B. Now again, you don't have to learn anything new. We already have built all the basic knowledge. We already know all the ways of using this model to express this whole adjustment process in a very easy way. All you need to do is again just start off with the same 4-part process, and this time we'll just give a little bit more detail of what is happening in our graph, and through this graph we can sort of talk with the examiner and express our answer as we move along explaining what is happening in the graph. So let me explain once I have this initial starting point. So this is a more neat one because we are going to use this now to explain the whole transition or adjustment of the market to a new equilibrium when, let's say, demand increases. So again, step number 1, draw the initial starting point. Step number 2 is the same. Draw a demand curve after it has increased, so shift it to the right. Now you see the reason why the market moves from this starting equilibrium A to equilibrium B is that initially after the demand has shifted to the right to D2, let's imagine the market next day opens with the same equilibrium price. If the market opens with the same equilibrium price, then you see this is not our demand curve anymore. It has changed, it has shifted. So market, if it opens, it doesn't know any economics, it opens, starts next day at same P star, then the quantity supplied will be the same amount, the horizontal distance up till the same supply curve because supply has not changed. But this time at this old equilibrium price, the quantity demanded will be much more because demand has increased, which means quantity demanded at each possible price it increases. Which means that now in this market, the quantity demanded at the old equilibrium price will be much more than the quantity supplied, which is only till this supply curve. So all of this excess demand will be created in this products market. That is, there will be a shortage. And once there is a shortage, once there is an imbalance, we already know how to explain the adjustment towards the new equilibrium. So in this case, given a shortage, just go back to your basics. The price will start to increase, and as price increases, the quantity supplied will increase, and as the price increases, the quantity demanded will decrease. But there will still be a shortage, and therefore the price will again increase, quantity supplied will again increase, and the price, as it increases more, quantity demanded will also fall again until you reach this equilibrium where the price overall has increased and the equilibrium quantity as compared to what it was, it has also increased. So talk through this graph, you can explain this whole transition. And the other important idea that you can take out of this detailed explanation of adjustment towards the new equilibrium is that you see, once starting from this equilibrium A, once we said the demand has shifted, after that the prices started to adjust because this increase in demand created a shortage. And as prices increased, quantity supplied increased. You move along the same supply curve, and then as prices started to increase, quantity demanded decreased. That is, you moved along the same new demand curve. That is, initially there was a lot of increase in quantity demanded, there was a shortage. As price starts to increase, some of these new excess consumers will leave the market, whereas on the other hand, as prices are increasing, some producers will start selling more, which allows us to answer this very confusing MCQ question that you will sometimes see. The demand of product is increasing. What will happen to its quantity supplied? Again, since this graph has gotten too messy, but you see, just think of this whole transition to a new equilibrium after the demand increases, and you will be able to answer this very confusing question, which you can't memorize. Demand has increased. What will happen to quantity supplied? Now again, Follow the same 4-step process, this time just in more detail, the way we have expressed the whole transition. So let's assume this is the demand and this is the supply of a product. Now we have to answer this question of demand has increased. So first thing, shift the demand to the right. Then we are asked what will happen to quantity supplied. Well, we know that this market initially which starts at this equilibrium point A based on initial demand and supply. Now as the demand of the product increases and moves to the right to this new D2, at the old equilibrium price, the quantity demanded now, the distance till the new demand curve, will be much more than the quantity supplied or the distance till the supply curve. Supply is not changing. So at this old equilibrium price, now since this is not our demand curve anymore, according to the new demand and the supply, the old equilibrium price, you will get a shortage, you will get excess demand. And because of that, the price will start to increase. And as price increases, quantity supplied increases. You move along the same supply curve and you have the answer to your question. So don't memorize these things. Just learn how you can play around with this graph of demand and supply. It's really easy. Think of it as a simple mobile game, simple stupid mobile game where you can just shift a few curves. If you know a little bit of economic meaning, that increase or shift right means consumers wish to buy more because of non-price factors and so on and so forth. Just learn how you can shift these graphs, read off the new equilibrium, and in terms of these transitions of how the equilibrium moves from one point to another. Remember, I am just explaining here the shift of demand, increase in demand. But you can work out pretty much any of the 4 different possible sort of shifts, and the whole process of adjustment, you can explain it very easily. So any shift of demand and supply, it will either lead to a situation where there is a shortage or a surplus, and then you can explain that surplus prices will start to fall, shortage prices will start to increase, and you will always automatically reach to the right conclusions. And you have to be confident with this. Don't stop and try to, again recall things that is my graph taking me to the right conclusion. Just practice this graph. Watch this video if you have to do it again. I have been doing all the different possibilities just to make sure that you can see how you can very quickly simply work these things out. And that is how you are supposed to learn this model of demand and supply. And to end this entire discussion that we have been doing in this last video of changes in market equilibrium, which is basically, as I said, is a way in which, without knowing a lot of economic meaning, we have just been learning as a simple video game as to how we can use this model of demand and supply to work out things that you will be required to in your exams. But let me just end here by showing you how this model of demand and supply and all the different things that we have learned about it, how can we use them to actually analyze a lot of real life important changes in the markets, and how this model actually reflects the reality of the things. So what I'm going to do is that let's assume here we have the market of these medical masks before coronavirus came in. So as step 1, we have just assumed an initial price and quantity. Then when the coronavirus came in, then of course these things became a lifesaver, and therefore as consumers, of course we were impacted. We would all want to have one mask. So regardless of the price, this coronavirus was a non-price factor because of which the consumers would wish to buy more, and that would tell us that the demand of these masks would increase. Graphically, that would mean a shift right of the demand curve to this D2 over here. And let me just extend this demand curve a bit. Now this model then tells us that, look, if this is not the demand of corona masks anymore or medical masks, then at the old equilibrium price, suddenly the quantity demanded will be much more than the quantity being supplied. And that our model tells us that there would have been a shortage of these masks. And we all know that initially there was a huge shortage of masks. There were people who were trying to send SMSs and WhatsApp messages trying to tell you that masks are available at this shop or that shop and so on and so forth, because there was suddenly a shortage. People started to find it difficult to get these masks. Whereas the quantity demanded, it of course increased regardless of what the price was. We didn't go to medical stores thinking that I'll buy a mask if it's 10 rupees, but I won't buy it if it's 15 rupees. We went to these shops thinking that we want a mask regardless of what the price is. And we were extra careful. Since we knew there was a shortage, we all wanted to get hold of as many masks as we could. So some of us were buying 50 masks, as many as we could. Maybe we can give it to friends and so on and so forth. So this graph, which is telling us that, look, if the demand of masks increases, there will be a shortage. This is actually what happened. And what happened next was that we all know that the prices of these masks, they started to increase. And this is what our model tells us. If there is a shortage of any product, the prices will increase. Now, the next thing that the model tells us is that once the prices increase, then as price increase, more producers will have an incentive of profit, so quantity supplied will increase, and you will start seeing more masks in the market. At a higher price, quantity supplied will increase, and that is exactly what happened. People starting selling masks even if they were doing something else previously. Butcher shops started selling masks, stationery shops started selling masks, roadside vendors started selling masks. What was going on? Our model is telling us that, look, after a shortage, price of masks would have increased. That would have given an incentive to all of these people to now start selling and producing masks. And this is exactly what happened. On the other hand, when the price started to increase, previously, as most of us would go and buy as many masks as we could get, now when we went to the shops and we saw that the mask is not just 15 rupees each, but it has increased, the price has increased to, let's say, 500. That is where our quantity demanded started to fall. Some of these excess consumers that had come into the market due to rising prices, some of them started to be rationed out. Shortage became lesser, and this is exactly what happened. They started to find it more easy to get a mask. More of them were available. But prices still kept on increasing, and eventually the corona mask market settled into a nice equilibrium where the price had increased, but the equilibrium quantity also had increased, that more masks were being produced. And we all know that eventually we are all in a nice equilibrium where if you want to go and buy a mask, you are able to easily get it. Why? Because the quantity demanded at this higher equilibrium price is equal to quantity supplied. This price would have kept on increasing if the demand and supply had not matched each other. So your model of demand and supply, remember, through these basic simple ideas, it will always capture reality. And therefore, instead of memorizing things, just learn how you can play around it, shift a few curves and move step by step, and you will always get to right conclusions, and you will be very, very well prepared to tackle anything that shows up in your A-level exams.